What's good? What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of The Urban Platform Speaks. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel as you tune in and check out the content. And with that being said, man, I wanna react to a video Jason Whitlock just made, and this guy right here on the screen is a writer, and he's also a Hall of Fame voter, right? And he came onto Jason Whitlock's podcast to try and explain why Bill Belichick got got screwed over when it came to the Hall of Fame vote. And so before I play the audio from that, I just want to say that, like, imagine working 16 hours a day, which some NFL coach probably work more than that. But imagine working 16-hour days and dedicating years and years to like your craft, and then you had the kind of success that Bill Belichick had. Six Super Bowls with the New England Patriots, two Super Bowls with the Giants as a defensive coordinator, right? So his record speaks for itself. But then you have writers who come down the line and try to justify why Bill Belichick can be a first ballot Hall of Famer, right? When his record, his record is a no-brainer. You don't have any other. I can't think of another head coach with more than four. Like the guy Walsh had four Super Bowls with the San Francisco 49ers. The guy from the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think his name was Chuck Knowles. He had four with the Pittsburgh Steelers as a head coach, right? And so for these guys, these Hall of Fame voters who think that they know the game so well that they can come and say, well, Bill Belichick is still not qualified to be, a first ballot Hall of Famer. I just don't think is any excuse, in my opinion, that you can give to say, well, he's not qualified. What, like he eclipsed everything as far as the records. Now, there are some things on his that happened as far as like Deflategate and Spygate, right? But if Deflategate and Spygate was he played the penalty for those, and if they were any bigger than what they were, then maybe they should have like kicked Bill Belichick out of football at the time that they happened. But once he paid the penalty for those allegations that came with Deflategate and they came with Spygate, then that should be behind him. Or even if you consider that, you got to say, well, wow, man, this guy still had a Hall of Fame, an exceptional, not just a Hall of Fame career, but he had an exceptional Hall of Fame career. And I'm not even a Bill Belichick New England Patriots fan, right? They done knocked my Patriots, my Ravens out of the playoffs several times, right? So I'm not Tom Brady fan or a Patriots fan. But when the record, like I say, speak for itself. So nothing that this guy can say, in my opinion, would justify like Bill Belichick not getting into the Hall of Fame on the first ballot. It to me, it just seemed like it's political. And so, with that being said, I'm gonna play the audio from Jason Whitlock's show, and I'm gonna come back and react.
How much heat have you been taking since you released your column?
Yeah, I think I don't know how to put it on the meter, but I'd say it's exponential compared to a number of things that I've had come at me in the past. And I certainly expected blowback, understand the dissent, understand the anger. But it has been a lot, and I think I'm trying to think of it as in the spirit of it adding to the dialogue in the end. I mean, that's how I'm trying to process it, that I think if nothing else, no matter how much it's upset people, I do think if they actually read the column instead of just the headline, they would come through it with at least an appreciation of the dilemma the voters are up against in how it's currently structured.
See, and I know I haven't really listened to what he said, right? But what is the dilemma when you look at his body of work? Like, what is the dilemma? People can rationalize anything. Then, if this guy can win all those Super Bowls and be on this many Super Bowl winning teams, and you can still rationalize that he's not deserving, then I don't know. Especially for somebody, they don't understand his job, just like he probably don't understand like the ins and outs of their job, and he probably wouldn't. He would nowhere in the world he would be able to critique these guys and say, "Well, you are a an award-winning author or anything like that," because he don't understand what they do to that magnitude.
What's the dilemma in your mind?
Yeah, it's good, and I'm glad you're giving me a chance to sort of say the whole thing out loud because it probably merits that. The way there's two phases of the voting, basically, or two branches. One is the modern players. That's a whole separate category, and all those are their own debates, of course. What the structure has come to be with the coaches, a contributor, and senior players is that there are a total of 5 of those under one umbrella of voting. So in other words, 3 senior candidates, a coach, and a contributor. And out of those 5, they're all lumped together into one vote. You can pick 3. So as I noted, I think up high in the column, if it were a simple yes, no, up, down vote on Bill Belichick, I absolutely would have voted for him. But that's not exactly how it works. Obviously, I understand people saying he's the most qualified of the group. I do think he's the most qualified of the group. But what I found, I'm rambling more than you were ready for.
No.
What I found as I went along in the process was that I felt obligated to enter it with an open mind. And as it simmered down to what those 3 picks should be, I found myself thinking a lot about last chances for guys who are never going to get in the Hall of Fame if they don't get in now. What happens with the senior pool is voters kind of jokingly call it the abyss. But once you're in the senior pool, you're in there with dozens of people backed up over the years. We could go on and on about how that's come to be, but part of it is that the Pro Football Hall of Fame didn't start till 1963. So there's a whole bunch of dynamics there. But once you're in that abyss, you only kind of come back out when a senior committee that year makes you their nominees. And then if you don't get the full board approval, then pretty much you go back into that and you're probably not going to get another chance, at least not anytime soon.
So my question is, as it relates to the senior candidates, take Ken Anderson. In my view, not a Hall of Famer. Roger Craig, not a Hall of Famer.
All right. So if Bill Belichick was up against Roger Craig and Ken Anderson, I don't know Roger. I do know. I don't know Ken Anderson. Oh, Ken Anderson. I think he was the quarterback for the Bengals. All right. So I know those guys. Roger Craig was a running back for the San Francisco 49ers. I remember him. If you got Bill Belichick still had was better at his job than those guys were, so it wouldn't be any contest.
L.C. Greenwood, not a Hall of Famer. And so part of my deal is I think you guys, and respectfully, are like, hey, we got to get as many people in as possible. And me, someone on the outside, is like, you got to get as many deserving people in as possible, and you got to keep as many undeserving people out. And like there should be like hard lines, because if everybody gets in, it's not a Hall of Fame anymore.
I totally agree with you on that point. And one of the reasons it's come to this structure, I think, is a reflection of that thinking. I think the thinking is, well, we don't want to dilute the meaning of this. And if I did not think those guys had really strong and important Hall of Fame cases, I wouldn't have just said, oh, we're going to rubber stamp the seniors. I find myself thinking about how the NFL was made and this generation of players. You're a little younger than me still somehow, Jason, but these are a lot of the men I grew up watching and that became synonymous with why I love the NFL. They were generational type players. I definitely think the merits of each is an open question, and I think that's sort of the fun in sports. But to me, I think I wrote this in the column, like Roger Craig, when I got on the Hall of Fame committee about 5 years ago, I'm like, Roger Craig's not in the Hall of Fame? I mean, he was, I think, a transformative player on one of the best teams of a 10 or 15 year period. I think he in a lot of ways set the tone for the modern running back. L.C. Greenwood, all decade on one of the best defenses ever. Ken Anderson, 4-time NFL passing leader.
Yeah, see, I like all of those guys: Greenwood, Ken Anderson, and Roger Craig. But like what they did, like really, in my opinion, just don't measure up to what Bill Belichick did. All of them were really great, but ball players.
My little snapshots here probably don't adequately convey what happens in that meeting, and we're not really supposed to talk about how the meeting goes, but the dynamics are, I think, open. And we spent about 3.5 hours talking through these 5 people. I think it was about 3.5 hours, and that's a 5-minute presentation by people who are very informed and passionate, and a lot of comparison points with people who are in the Hall of Fame, all these kinds of things. I will say, though, I don't dispute anybody seeing it differently. I can only speak to how I see it. It's a Rorschach test a lot on how these things go, and everybody has different values. But I guess I do want to assure you and the public, however it should be phrased, that I think if you sat in these meetings, you would be impressed by the rigor and robust nature of the conversation. I actually think you'd really enjoy it, Jason. I think you'd be a good voice in there.
Yeah.
So the rigor and the robust conversation that goes on there is still, it don't matter if you get the decision wrong. I mean, this right here was like a slam dunk, basically. Not it was a layup. It was a basic layup, and they, what's really like, why should you need to have a rigorous conversation about a layup?
I think that's why I'm not in there. But here, because one of the things I would object to, and this, I think this happened long before you, Vahe. They came up with this story or justification of, can you tell the story of the NFL without this person? And from the very first time I heard it, I was like, no, that's not the standard. No, I completely disagree with that. That's a narrative story. That's a storytelling story, and journalists love narratives and blah blah blah. And I get.
And all right, so let me speak to that point. Like, can you tell the story of the NFL? And like he said, that shouldn't be the standard. But like, if somebody asks you what was the NFL, like let's say if the NFL went away and somebody asks you what was the NFL like, and you told the whole story, you told the story of the NFL, and you left out the New England Patriots, and you left out what Bill Belichick did as a coach, you're not telling the full story. As a matter of fact, you can't tell the full story, because if you tell about teams that lost in playoff games or teams that lost in the Super Bowl, some of those teams that lost in the playoffs, some of those teams that lost Super Bowls, lost to the New England Patriots, right? So how can you tell? You can't even tell the story of the New York Giants. Like, the Giants beat the Patriots 2 times in the Super Bowl. And if you're telling a story about the Giants, then you got to include the Patriots. Or if you're telling a story about the Baltimore Ravens and how they lost big playoff games, you got to bring up the Patriots. Like, the Patriots is so much of a connection in the NFL. You can't, wins and losses, like, you can't leave them out. So that should be the standard, because football is really, when it boils down to it, football is about entertainment, right? And so, I don't know, that's just like talking about music and not bringing up Michael Jackson. It don't make no sense.
But this is about just merit and excellence, and like, holy cow, this was one of the greatest, unbelievable players of all time. It's not about, hey, the Hogs were a big deal and we need someone from the Hogs because they were popular. And so Russ Grimm gets in, and I'm someone that thinks Russ Grimm has no business in the Hall of Fame. And I love offensive linemen, but that's a narrative deal. And so,
all right, I push back on it. Offensive linemen, they don't get a lot of spotlight, right? And you don't really get to know a whole bunch of the offensive linemen, because that's not like a sexy position. Like Jeff Saturday, if the media didn't hype up Jeff Saturday, or what, you know, he was a center for the Indianapolis Colts. Then you have what's the guy the Kelsey, his brother. What was the Kelsey? One of the Kelsey brothers. It was a center for the not Jason Kelsey. What's the other Kelsey guy name? He was a center though for the Eagles, you know. But if the media didn't hype him up and bring attention to like how good he really was at his position, like most people wouldn't know. All you just see a big guy who snapped the ball to Jalen Hurts. You don't know, like until people point them out that okay, these guys are exceptional at what they do. So yeah, centers, offensive linemen, Jonathan Ogden. Like most people technically don't know. You know, if you see Jonathan Ogden blocking for a quarterback, all you know is he's a big guy that stop people from, you know, from getting to the quarterback. But you don't know how really great he was until other players and other professional athletes were like, man, this guy is that deal. Right. So sometimes you need other people to toot your horn in order for you to have success, because like the average fan don't really appreciate, they wouldn't appreciate you know, the guy Kelsey, or they wouldn't appreciate Saturday, Jeff Saturday, or they wouldn't appreciate Jonathan Ogden like they should be appreciated, because those positions are not, they're not the sexy position. You know, like you recognize the quarterback because he touching the ball every time, the running back because he's making big plays, right? So I think, you know, they need somebody else to, you know, to shed light on what these other guys do. But it's a slam dunk or a layup when it comes to Bill Belichick, man. And I can't really, this guy, you know, he doing a lot of talking, but he hasn't given like a legitimate reason why Bill Belichick was not a first ballot Hall of Famer, man. It's crazy. It's crazy. So I'm gonna stop it right there. But you know, he never gave a real clear reason for that poor decision that they made. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Also, don't forget to leave a comment. And with that being said, I'm gonna check you all out in the next video. Peace.